One of the most trusted pregnancy drugs of the 20th century, caused over 10,000 birth defects, and it was approved without a single human trial. Mothers were told it was safe, doctors prescribed it with confidence, but the truth was far more devastating. The 1970s were a bold time for invention. From high-tech medical breakthroughs to backyard toys and household products, the decade was bursting with new ideas. But not every innovation made life safer or smarter. In this video, we're exploring 8 inventions that were once celebrated but later banned for being far more dangerous than anyone expected. Some caused lasting health problems, others led to injuries, lawsuits, and even death. Let's take a look at the risky side of retro, where progress came with a price. Number 1. Leaded gasoline. There was a time when the smell of gasoline meant freedom, road trips, muscle cars, and revving engines, but hidden in that sweet metallic scent was a danger no one could see: lead. Starting in the 1920s and peaking through the 70s, tetrethyl lead was added to gasoline to reduce engine knocking. It worked, but at a terrible cost. Every time a car hit the road, microscopic lead particles were pumped into the air, settling on playgrounds, sidewalks, and front lawns. The damage was silent but devastating. Studies showed children living near busy roads had lower IQs and higher rates of developmental disorders. In one shocking case in the 1970s, a pediatrician in St. Louis found that nearly every child in her inner-city clinic had elevated blood lead levels. The culprit? Car exhaust. Despite mounting evidence, oil companies and lead producers fought tooth and nail to keep it on the market. It wasn't until the late 1980s that unleaded gasoline became the standard in the US, and by then, millions had already been affected. Leaded gasoline didn't just fuel cars, it fueled one of the biggest public health crises of the 20th century. Number 2. Thalidomide, a pregnancy sedative. In the late 1950s and early 60s, thalidomide was marketed as a miracle cure for morning sickness, a gentle sedative that promised relief for expecting mothers. But what started as comfort in a pill turned into one of the most tragic medical disasters of the 20th century. The drug interfered with fetal development, leading to babies born with severe deformities, tiny, flipper-like limbs, missing arms and legs, or underdeveloped organs. In total, over 10,000 children across 46 countries were affected. One of the most haunting stories came from the UK, where a mother named Shirley McGreal gave birth to a son with no arms or legs. She had taken just a few pills. "If only someone had warned me," she later said in testimony that rocked the pharmaceutical world. Thalidomide wasn't just a tragic mistake, it was a wake-up call. The global outrage that followed led to sweeping reforms in drug testing, including the FDA's requirement for more rigorous clinical trials. Today it remains a cautionary tale in every medical ethics textbook. Number 3. Radium watches. In the early to mid-20th century, glowing watch dials felt like something out of science fiction. With just a glance in the dark you could tell the time, thanks to a miracle ingredient called radium. What no one realized back then was that this radioactive element was slowly poisoning the very people who made those watches shine. The danger hit hardest in the 1920s and 30s, but the effects lingered into the 1970s, when these watches were still in use, and still harming. The factory workers, mostly young women, were trained to use fine brushes to paint numbers onto the dials. To keep the tip sharp, they were told to lick it, lip, dip, paint, over and over again. They became known as the radium girls. Over time, their teeth fell out, their jaws disintegrated. Many developed bone cancer and died young. In one heartbreaking case, a woman named Grace Fryer fought for justice while literally watching her body decay. Her lawsuit became national news and forced America to rethink industrial safety. By the 1970s, radium watches were phased out and replaced with safer materials. But the glowing dials of yesterday cast a long, dark shadow, a reminder of how carelessness and corporate denial can cost lives. Number 4. Asbestos insulation. If you grew up in a house built before the 1980s, chances are the walls were hiding something more than just wiring, something deadly. Asbestos was everywhere. It lined attics, wrapped around pipes, and tucked between walls in schools, homes, and office buildings. Why? Because it was fire-resistant, durable, and cheap. Builders called it a miracle material. But what they didn't see, or didn't want to see, was what it did to the lungs. Asbestos fibers were so small they could float invisibly in the air. When inhaled, they lodged deep inside the lungs, sitting there for decades before symptoms appeared. People who were exposed in the 60s and 70s often didn't get sick until the 90s or later. One Navy veteran who worked in shipyards filled with asbestos later developed mesothelioma, a rare and aggressive cancer linked directly to asbestos exposure. By the time he was diagnosed, it was too late. His story became part of a national lawsuit that helped bring tighter regulations and awareness. Asbestos wasn't banned in many places until the late 70s, and even today it still lurks in older buildings. It's the kind of threat you never see coming until it's already done the damage. Number 5. Nuclear-powered pacemakers. It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, a tiny nuclear reactor implanted in your chest, but in the 1970s, this was real. Doctors were implanting pacemakers powered by plutonium-238, a radioactive material typically reserved for deep space missions. The idea made sense at the time. Traditional pacemakers ran on batteries that needed replacing every few years, which meant risky surgeries. A nuclear-powered device promised to last decades, maybe even a lifetime, but the risks were chilling. If the pacemaker was crushed in a car accident or damaged during surgery, it could leak radioactive material directly into the body. Disposal was another nightmare. These devices couldn't just be tossed in the trash. They required specialized handling and secure storage, something not every hospital was prepared for. In one well-documented case, a crematorium in Pennsylvania had to be decontaminated after unknowingly incinerating a patient who had died with a nuclear pacemaker still inside them. The result? Radioactive particles spread throughout the facility. By the 1980s, lithium battery pacemakers had improved enough to replace their nuclear cousins. Today, those atomic implants are rare relics of an era that dared to gamble with radiation in the name of progress. Number 6. Lawn darts, also known as jarts. Nothing said backyard fun quite like a game of lawn darts until you realized you were basically tossing steel-tipped missiles into the air and hoping no one wandered underneath. These weren't the soft plastic versions you'll find today. The original jarts had metal tips sharp enough to pierce a skull, and tragically, that's exactly what happened. In 1987, a 7-year-old girl named Michelle Snow was struck in the head by a lawn dart while playing in her driveway. She died just days later. Her father's campaign for justice helped bring the issue to national attention. It wasn't the first injury, and it wouldn't be the last. Emergency rooms saw a steady stream of lawn dart-related accidents, deep puncture wounds, brain injuries, and broken bones, all from a game that was supposed to bring families together. By 1988, after mounting pressure from grieving parents and consumer safety advocates, the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission banned them outright. Today, jarts serve as a haunting reminder that even the most innocent-seeming toys can turn deadly without oversight. Number 7. DDT pesticide. There was a time when DDT was sprayed like magic dust, across farms, fields, even playgrounds. It killed mosquitoes, wiped out crop pests, and was hailed as a modern miracle. But behind the cloud of pesticide was a storm of destruction no one expected. DDT didn't just kill bugs. It built up in the food chain, poisoning birds, fish, and mammals, working its way into ecosystems one spray at a time. The bald eagle, America's national symbol, was nearly wiped out. The chemical thinned their eggshells so badly that they often cracked before hatching. Humans weren't spared either. Over time, researchers linked DDT exposure to cancer, liver damage, and reproductive problems. Farm workers and communities near heavy-use areas suffered most, but the effects rippled far and wide. The turning point came with the release of Silent Spring in 1962, a groundbreaking book by biologist Rachel Carson. Her warning about the dangers of DDT lit the fuse for the modern environmental movement. Public pressure mounted, and by 1972 the U.S. banned its use. DDT was supposed to be the ultimate weapon against nature's nuisances. Instead, it became a cautionary tale about what happens when we fight nature without understanding the cost. Number 8. Thermite road flares. They looked like ordinary emergency tools, something you'd toss in the trunk and hope you'd never need. But thermite road flares weren't just bright, they burned hotter than molten lava. At over 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit, these roadside beacons could melt through metal, ignite spilled gasoline, and turn a minor breakdown into a full-blown disaster. Once lit, there was no putting them out. Water? Useless. Dirt? Barely helped. If a flare fell over or was accidentally dropped near a leaking fuel line, the results could be catastrophic. In one widely reported case, a man in Arizona suffered third-degree burns across his legs after a flare rolled under his car while he changed a tire. By the time he noticed the heat, his pant leg had caught fire, and the flare was still burning. Originally used by the military and emergency crews, thermite flares made their way into civilian glove compartments during the 1970s. But as injuries mounted and vehicles went up in flames, safety officials began phasing them out. Today, they've been replaced by LED beacons and battery-powered hazard lights that won't set your car or you on fire. Thermite flares may have lit the road, but they also lit the fuse on one of the most dangerous roadside tools ever sold to drivers. We've come a long way since the 1970s, but looking back, it's hard to believe some of these inventions ever made it to the public. From radioactive implants to exploding soda cans, it's a wonder more of us didn't end up in the ER. Now we want to hear from you. Which of these banned inventions do you think was the most absurd or downright baffling? Were you ever injured by one of these? Or do you still have one stashed away in the attic? Drop your stories in the comments. We're always curious what strange relics people still remember or still own. And if you enjoyed this look back at the risky side of retro, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more surprising slices of history.